Okay, preparing for your stages of clay lab. So in your kit, either your bucket or your plastic bag, you either have a broken piece of white pure clay called bisqueware. Be careful, it might be sharp, or a full piece. The edges might be very sharp. You also have a glazed, either full piece, I'm using Purple Panda here, or another piece of clay. Those are for your stages of clay, so you can line them up. And then you'll need your good surface area again to work from, so you'll need your slab mat. I have 2 here just because I'm demoing here. And then you'll need your slip from yesterday. You'll need a small amount of clay, so you want to get your clay out. If you have a scrap of clay on top, that's fine. And always, always, always close that bag. Check for air holes. And I always fold it over and I put it in my bucket to keep extra moisture. I already showed you how to cut clay with your wire tool. By the way, you can see the dry clay on there. If you didn't have a chance to clean it, get a cup or container of water. Just hold that over that and just carefully over the water clean it off. You can even put a little bit of water on your fingertips to keep that nice and clean. And then keep it in your bucket. Okay, so then you have your slip, your fresh clay. Yesterday, inside of your clay bag, you had a plate in your plastic bag and your clay should have gotten leather hard. This is the most difficult stage, so if you didn't quite get this stage, it got too dry, you could try that again without the plate and just leave the bag open a teeny bit. Getting things to stay leather hard or get leather hard is the most challenging. I'm going to take it out of the bag and on the plate and put it here. Then we have the bone dry clay. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, the bisqueware, which is the pure white clay, and then your glazed piece. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clay pieces here that we're going to work with, and this talks about the different stages of clay. Probably the most important thing you'll learn as a beginner in ceramics. So on your chart, either in Schoology or if you printed it out, you are going to do the clay lab, and basically you are going to look at the presentation, the Google slideshow, and walk through it and label the 6 stages of clay. Then you're going to give a brief description, and you have them all right here. And then finally you're going to do the lab. There's a few questions. So I did the first one in red and I did slip, so you don't have to do slip. So for this slip one, I described it as gray. It's kind of a tan gray for the color. I also talked about how the temperature, that it was kind of room temperature or cool depending on where it was sitting. Always keep your clay at room temperature. Never sit it outside to get frozen. It's very hard to thaw. And then also like that it's smooth texture. Then you had to follow the lab to kind of understand it. So the presentation, the Google slideshow presentation. So some of the questions are, can it stick together? Well, it's slippery, so the chunks can, but technically no. Can it be fired? No, because it's wet and it's nothing really yet. And there were a few other questions on there that I answered for you in red. So then you're going to do that for each part of the lab. And like I said, there's 6 different ones. So the next piece of clay you have is the moist clay. This is where we call it plastic clay. There's no plastic in it. It's just plastic clay in the sense that it can bend easily. So when you did your properties of clay handout and lesson and took the notes, you learned about plasticity. So they also demoed in that slideshow that you can fold it and it won't crack. Once the clay starts to get cracks in it, it's losing its plasticity. Okay? If it does, you don't add water. You try to smooth it and just keep it moist. Unless you get to the point where it's pretty dry, then you can lightly spray water on it. But adding water with a sponge or lots of water actually weakens clay. So that's the next stage, which is the plastic clay. Like I said, the leather hard stage is the most challenging. So this stage, I can still carve into it. Again, always over water if you have clay. So that's why you have a bucket. So you want to be able to draw or write into that clay and carve into it when it's leather hard, but it's not so dry that you couldn't attach another piece of clay to it. So if I wanted to attach a piece of clay to it, I could score it either with the dowel tool or my fork. And you always want, and I can use the soft clay here, you always want to score and slip it. If you don't have slip made up, water works too, but a little slip is better. So I can attach this as well together. So I'm kind of cheating a little, giving you when you're doing your lab, but okay, and then smooth that. All right, the next stage After leather hard, don't forget to answer all the questions for the plastic or moist clay and the leather hard clay. The next stage is the bone dry clay. The bone dry clay is white and chalky, and it's so dry that I cannot easily do that. This is the stage where it's the most fragile or brittle. So when you guys did your slipping and scoring, you want to keep that moist and not this brittle, dry clay, because when you transport it, it's easy to break. Also, this clay should go in your bucket. I don't have a bucket because I had to give them all to you guys. So, of water, so you don't have dust all around, and never blow it, okay? So that's where that bone dry clay could go when you're done with it. But you want to go through all the descriptions. So those first 4 stages, I already put that in there, but the first 4 stages of clay can be recycled. That means we can put it in special machines or back in water and we can recycle it. But the next stages are after the clay is fired. So we put them in the kiln and fire them. And the first firing is called bisque, and that's that pure white, and that prepares it, turns it into like a rock sponge that's porous. You learned about porosity, and then that gets it ready for glaze, which we'll do either when you return to school in the hybrid schedule, or we'll work it out so we can figure out if you are remote how to work with some glaze later. So if I decided to fire my piece, then I would fire it in the kiln once it's bone dry, and then it would be bisque fired. And the bisque fire temperature is 1800 degrees. We'll talk more about firing later. It cannot be recycled at the bisque stage because it changed chemically in the kiln. And then finally, after we apply the glaze, we fire it again and it's glazeware. So these 2 stages are after firing. So you want to complete that lab in Schoology the best you can, and you can also email me if you have any questions. When you're done, it's very hard to work with these scraps. So I would either put them in your slip cup if there's room, or put them in here. And then read your safety protocols, or carefully in your bucket. Your bucket's much bigger. I don't want to bend this a lot. And then gently with a damp sponge, not a soaking wet sponge, you can wipe off your slab mat. Don't put your slab mat wet in the plastic bag. Just put it next to it or wait till it dries before you put it in the plastic bag. And then wipe up your surface area so you have a clean place to work, and also wash your hands. Enjoy!